Hello and welcome once again wherever you are, on the planet All or Nothing. I've got a few passages today from Mr. Gurdjieff and plenty of other material. Back on the transspace ship Karnak, we hear, I'm well aware, my dear Captain, that I'm giving you no easy task, because I already witnessed the difficulties of carrying out such a request when I was returning after my gracious pardon to the place of my arising, the planet Caritas, and desired to visit the planet Descaldino on the way. On that occasion, the captain of the inter-system ship Omnipresent had agreed to this, and had directed the falling of the vessel towards the atmosphere of that planet. Overcoming all the obstacles with great effort, he succeeded in carrying out my request, and thus, before going back to my native land, I was able to reach the surface of the planet Descaldino and have the happiness of greeting the great Sarunurushan, the creator of my genuine being existence, and receive what was most dear and most precious to me, his creator benediction. To this request of Beelzebub's the captain replied, Very good, your reverence. I will think over how to carry out your desire. I do not know just what the obstacles were at that time for the captain of the ship Omnipresent, but now on the direct route between the holy planet Purgatory and the planet Descaldino there lies the solar system called Salzmanino, which includes numerous cosmic concentrations destined for purposes of the great turbo-autoegocratic process for the transformation and radiation of the substance Zilno-Trago, and therefore it will scarcely be possible for our ship Karnak to fall in a direct line through that system. But in any event, I will try in one way or another to satisfy the desire expressed by your reverence. Having said this, the captain rose and, bowing respectfully to Beelzebub, he went out. This reminds me that it's sometimes said that your grandparents or someone in your ancestors are secretly guiding your whole journey and you're really working for them, and as the vanguard for your line. At this time of year there are planes buzzing along the seafront, which makes it hard to do a recording, and along with the jet set you have the seagulls, the scaffolders, and the cars that pass by as well. It's tricky. For some reason this morning I was thinking about Tolkien. There are a lot of people on the planet who are very inspired by Tolkien and his movies, and I realised that in the human population there's a kind of Tolkien emanation, like a mist, which does actually affect them, and also needs a certain kind of leadership, so that the Tolkien emanation can lead its people in a good way. Actually, what we call humanity is a series of these ephemeral creations, and that we have to reassess what mankind is and what its history is on the basis of these currents, which actually are the motivating force, because we're not really molecular beings, we are emotional beings, and we follow these trends and these currents. As for our personal intelligence, or so-called intelligence, I was watching a conversation between some friends the other day, a man and a woman. He said something, she said something, he said something, she said something, and it was very clear to me that every time they said something, it was dope. And they were just starting again and starting again and starting again, and there was no real connection, there was no actual conversation. They did not follow each other, help each other, or listen to each other, or connect with each other, and it was just dope. And much of our lives, the society is like that. The only thing that's not like that, perhaps, are those currents that I just mentioned, that carry along people in their wake. Now let's hear from Mr. Gurdjieff again. The third kind of influence, suggestion, is very powerful. Every person is under the influence of suggestion, one person suggests to another. Many suggestions occur very easily, especially if we don't know that we are being exposed to suggestion. But even if we do know, suggestions penetrate. It is very important to understand one law. As a rule, at every moment of our life, only one center works in us, either mind or feeling. Our feeling is of one kind when another center is not looking on, when the ability to criticize is absent. By itself, a center has no consciousness, no memory. It is a chunk of a particular kind of meat without salt. An organ, a certain combination of substances which merely possesses a special capacity of recording. Indeed, it greatly resembles the coating of a recording tape. If I say something to it, it can later repeat it. It is completely mechanical, organically mechanical. All centers differ slightly as to their substance, but their properties are the same. Now, if I say to one center that you are beautiful, it believes it. If I tell it that this is red, it also believes it. But it does not understand. Its understanding is quite subjective. Later, if I ask it a question, in reply it repeats what I have said. It will not change in 100 or 1,000 years. It will always remain the same. Our mind has no critical faculty in itself. No consciousness, nothing. And all the other centers are just the same. What then is our consciousness, our memory, our critical faculty? It's very simple. It is when one center specially watches another, when it sees and feels what is going on there, and seeing it records it all within itself. It receives new impressions, and later, if we wish to know what happened the previous time, if we ask and search in another center, we will be able to find what has taken place in the first center. It is the same with our critical faculty. One center watches another. With one center we know that this thing is red, but another sees it as blue. One center is always trying to persuade another. This is what criticism is. If two centers go on for a long time disagreeing about something, this disagreement hinders us in thinking about it further. If another center is not watching, the first continues to think as it did originally. And we very seldom watch one center from another, only sometimes, perhaps only a minute a day. Well, it's been my long learning that actually the path of evolution actually takes place in the body, and the body is watching the head. In fact, the more you learn, you see that the body is activating the head. Like I said last week, most people use the functions of the head, like the face, the smiling, the makeup, and the sounding big. They use these functions as a kind of weapon, because these are flowers that have not really opened. They have not learned what they are, they have not learned how to be those functions, and they have not integrated with the heart, the core of the person. And so they're used in this terrible way, especially given our fallen nature. I guess if we weren't fallen, we would be simply simple people living off the land, and we wouldn't have anything upstairs at all. That's the difference. Actually, there's a huge world of possibilities for the evolution of people, but they do not know, they do not understand, and they certainly have no methods. He says, there is no need to gather more into this garbage can. Everything is there. But there is no understanding. The place of understanding is quite empty. You may have a great deal of money that does not belong to you, but you would be better off to have far less, even if $100 that is your own. But nothing you have is your own. You may have a great deal of money that does not belong to you. What he's saying here is that we have acquired all these experiences, impressions, and they are not converted into being. One of the nonsenses that has arisen in the New Age development of Gurdjieff since he died in 1950, one of the ideas that has arisen and failed is the idea that you need to feel a certain energy very specially. You don't. You've already got tons of material. That's not the point at all. That's when you hear people talk about, I have to get certain special higher impressions. If only I could get them in, everything will be fixed for me. No, that's not the answer. The fact is that we are accreted in this fallen world. We have many different parts that don't work at all together, that don't know each other, that are broken, that are... as Gurdjieff says, you have to take the whole machine apart and put all the metal in oil. It really requires a lot of skill and a lot of diligence and serious methods to do it. And only then will the components work together, and only then are the already massive amount of impressions that you have going to get through. And I've been thinking, about some of the typical spiritual words you hear about accepting others, or about awakening. We're going to suddenly awaken. Well, in the Bible it talks about being awake. It doesn't talk about awakening as this moment where everything is just going to be fixed. No. We can expect that most of the conversations people have come from fallen people, and they reflect the fallenness of those people. If I think about the many strands that have come out since the 1950s, you have Madame de Salzmann's book, which is very strange because it makes no mention of any of the real sciences that Gurdjieff had developed. Nothing. Then you have Maurice Nicole's massive, endless talking, where he uses all the Gurdjieff words like confetti. Everything is impressions, centers, energies, it's everywhere. Some people say that you can never talk about it. And yet others simply repeat verbatim, just like machines, everything that is in Search of the Miraculous. What's the difference? What's the difference? And going back to the conversation where everything starts again is just another dough. Most of what we call human life, the activity that we talk about, is actually a lot like that. It is all dough and dough and dough. I'll mention a couple of points of history. How is it that the energy of England had been retained and continued for centuries after centuries? Well, one of the answers is that it travelled along the guilds, the traditions of this country. I guess when I was younger, I was awfully impressed with the medical profession. At that time, it was probably justified. I've talked about the surgeon's magazine, The Lancet, which was initiated by an English surgeon called Thomas Wakeley in 1823. And about 100 years later, just after the devastation of the First World War, it was sold to Hodder Stoughton, which was in fact a Christian publisher. Unfortunately, in 1991, it was sold again to a multinational that's floated on the stock exchange, Elsevier Relics, it's called. But going back even further than Thomas Wakeley, he was part of the Royal College of Surgeons, which is an extremely ancient organisation in England that goes back to 1400. And in fact, it goes back even further than that, through the early guild system, all the way back to 1067, the year after the Norman conquest. The Lancet magazine, in fact, continued a line of work from 1066 all the way to 1991. Incredible. And it is in fact these things that keep the pulse of an octave alive and keep the same work of the same material. Even though imperceptible, this is where it's at. And England had many of them, so does Europe. Another thing was about the fall of the Roman Empire in about 500. Well, it was not too long after that when Charlemagne arose in Europe. And from 800 to 1800, that's a span of 1,000 years, his Holy Roman Empire existed and still existed in Europe. And it still existed in 1800 and had huge momentum, and this was the repository, the heart of the European religion. So says even people like Guénon and Evola. Like it or not, that's where it was. And within it is the materials of the heart of Europe. Growing up in London in such a secular and humanistic way, with people all around you telling you how wonderful it is to be a rainbow and how free we are and how stupid everybody of the past was, it's really quite shocking for me to be able to walk into a church just a few blocks away. The candles are still burning, the hymns are still the same, the Mass is exactly the same as it was centuries if not thousands of years ago. My God, is this stuff really still alive? I can barely believe it. Everything is still alive. People repeat E equals mc squared. They repeat it and think it means something, but it doesn't mean anything. The result of really understanding something is that you can apply it. You can apply it just like you can spread marmalade on toast. That's when you understand, when you can actually use it. Otherwise, it doesn't mean anything. There is this idea that if you teach something, then you will learn. I think that is true, but only in very special cases. It is only true if you teach what you actually understand, which I think is not very common these days. Let's return quickly to the Karnak. The fact is, he continued, turning to Hussein again, the three-brained beings of the planet Earth are inconceivably proud and touchy. If someone does not share their views or agree to do as they do, or criticize their manifestations, they are very offended, and their indignation knows no bounds. And if one of them should happen to have some power, he would order anyone rash enough to criticize his conduct, or to behave differently himself, to be shut up in the sort of place usually crawling with rats and lice. And if the offended one should be physically stronger and no one were looking, at least no important power-possessing being with whom he happened to be on bad terms, he would simply give the offender a good thrashing, as the Russian Sidor once thrashed his favourite goat. Well knowing this aspect of their strange psyche, I had no desire to offend them and incur their wrath. Furthermore, as I was profoundly aware that to outrage anybody's religious feelings is contrary to all morality, I tried, when existing among them, always to do as they did, so as not to be conspicuous and draw attention to myself. Here it will do no harm to point out that owing to the abnormal conditions of ordinary existence, they're the only beings on that strange planet, especially during recent centuries, who become notable and therefore are honoured by the rest, are those who manifest themselves somehow or other more absurdly than the majority, and that's a lot. And the more absurd their manifestations, the more stupid, mean, insolent, and tricks they play, the more celebrated they become, and the greater is the number of beings on their continent, or even on other continents, who know them personally, or at least by name. On the other hand, an honest being who does not behave absurdly has no chance at all of becoming famous, or even being noticed, however kind and sensible he may be. Yes, one thing that always gives me a very particular feeling, and perhaps you'd recognize it, is when I notice that there is a problem, and then try to fix it. Often people get really angry. Why? Why is because they feel criticized. They don't want to fix anything, they don't care. And you know something? I don't care that they don't care. But when I try to fix something, and they actually block you, and get offended, get angry, that gives me a completely different category of sensation. And the reason they're like that is because as they have not been introduced to who they really are, they cling on to this small self-image. And if you were to criticize them, they feel wounded in that self-image, and that's all they've got. In fact, people don't even inhabit or own their face properly. When you look into somebody's face, it's not frequently that you see the real person. What do you see? You see maybe one of the souped-up many eyes, or one of that wrong work and the excitement in their eyes, and positivity and progress and all those things that are used to keep the vehicle of the false self going. Anyway, from my close scrutiny and long efforts to understand all the methods and practices that are available, I'm not yet convinced that there aren't solutions. Yeah, perhaps there are. Now I want to discuss the endpoints that are proposed by various religions. In Advaita, there is this sense that one day you will realize permanently in your consciousness that everything is unreal, and all that will be left is Brahman. In Catholicism, of course, you end up habiting the kingdom of grace and light, which shines from your every pore. Now, in the law of attraction, there is this idea that life is talking to you all the time. Through the air, you can just kind of feel the currents, and that you should follow them because life really wants to give you everything that you want. It's just that you're not listening. Which is nice, but there's still the kind of death thing. Now, the Taoists, I quite like this one. They have the sense that if you really are super great, you not only can you develop higher bodies, but you can return home to the physical mortal world, and you can light that one up too and dissolve it. And once you can do that, you don't have a lot of problems left, eh? Sounds good to me. In any case, when I'm with ordinary people, I walk away always feeling very troubled because I'm picking up their energy of, being mortal and really, what's it all about? You can have good days or bad days, but ultimately, you're only headed to one destination, however many flat whites you have. But I heard this morning that Krishna's superior energy is completely opposite in quality to the material nature. And after all, who manufactured this flower? Was it not God? Is not this entire material creation from God and working under God's direction? Perhaps the flowers are speaking to us after all. Thank you for listening. Take care.
Thank you.